Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. My guest today is Beth Hawks. Beth taught middle school and high school science for 25 years, serving as the science department chair for Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. Beth taught 8th grade physical science, physics, chemistry, algebra 1B, health, photography, and yearbook, not all in the same year, of course. And after becoming aware of the science of learning, she frequently provided professional development to colleagues in her role as a resident brain enthusiast. She now moved into consulting full-time under the name of Learning Hawk. Her first book, Show Your Work, Teaching Smarter with Science of Learning, describes her real teacher experiences of implementing the science of learning techniques in their classrooms. We'll be talking to Beth about her book and her journey into the science of learning. I think you're going to like this one. Hi, Beth. Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works.
Hi, Gene. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And like I told you before we started recording, I was a little bit hesitant about reading another book on science of learning. And I was very excited to see how you put yours together, where it wasn't another rehashing of what we think about the science of learning, but is actually you went into the classroom to talk about classroom experiences, and not only your own, but with other teachers as well.
Yeah, that's what I wanted it to be. Because I read tons of these. Like every time I come home from a conference, I've got 4 or 5 more books. I love them. But that's what I found was lacking in them, that like they were either written by researchers, which I was a science teacher, so I love that. You get now, but lots of jargon. If you're not trained in how to parse science language, it can be a nightmare. Or it was like translators of research, like John Almarode or Andrew Watson or Barbara Oakley, and those were great. But I'd get done with a book and I'd be like, well, that was a lot neater than my classroom is, you know? And so I wanted something that reflected that reality of, yeah, you're going to try this, and the first time you're probably going to mess it up and you're going to need to tweak it. And, you know, what are the challenges for all of that? And
So that was the gap. It seems to me that's the gap you're trying to fill so you talk about 2 types of folks in this field, is, the actual researchers who write for the researchers, and then people who interpret it, which is a big, everybody wants to do that now, don't they? It's like, how can we get this implemented? So how did you?
Lord for them. I would have been lost if there hadn't been those.
But
so
you're
I'm not
still
sure either of those.
You're still filling a gap. You're still trying to fill the gap. So what do you think that gap looks like? Well,
I think it is saying like, these are the challenges, right? That you're going to try to implement this and it might work great first period and not so well third period, right? And what do you have to tweak in order to make that? The best analogy I've ever heard on it. Do you know who David Daniel is?
No.
He was a psychology professor at James Madison University. I think he works for the NIH now, but he did a keynote at a conference I was at. And he said, research is like growing plants in a greenhouse because they have so much control over the variables and all of that. And he said, teaching in your classroom is like growing plants in your yard. We've had 2 months of drought and then 2 weeks of nonstop rain, right? That's not happening in the greenhouse. But it doesn't mean those lessons from research are wrong. It just means you have to adapt them to your yard. And so I kind of wanted to write something that looked like it was in the yard instead of in the greenhouse.
Well, and I think there's 2 things as you're doing that. Not only that you wanted to provide that for teachers, but how do you get teachers to try stuff?
Yeah, I think making it approachable is the way to do it, right? To say you're going to do this imperfectly, and that's okay. It's gonna be messy in the beginning, and just embrace that, because that's what's, we tell our kids to try new things. We got to tell ourselves that too sometimes.
Well, we have to tell ourselves that. And you said you didn't use the word, but I'm going to use it. You're kind of a research nerd or geek, and so you're willing to do those, willing to try these things. What was it for you? What was the impetus for you to say, "Wow, this science of learning stuff, I'm standing up, I'm sitting up, I'm going to try some of these things."
So I was this is very funny. In my personnel file at my old job, it says I don't seek out professional development, which at the time, because one, I didn't want to leave my classroom. I was like, I don't want to stop teaching to be a better teacher. And then two, they weren't always great. And so I just got a brochure in my mailbox at school one day and was on my way to the recycling bin with it, like you do, when it was from Learning in the Brain. And I noticed some speaker on it. And I was like, oh, I'll take a look at this. And I had door duty. So I was standing there doing my door duty to greeting kids and looking at this brochure. And I was like sold, like this is clearly for smart people. And so I convinced the school that they should send me. And they said, okay, when you get back, you have to do a presentation. I was like, deal. And I mean, I got there and I was like, this is awesome. Because I knew there had been brain research for a long time, but that didn't necessarily translate into practice. And so having people say, like, well, here's what you can do was great. Now, it doesn't translate quite that neatly, right? Like you don't just come back and go, well, now they'll do that thing. But it did give me a way to think about it. And I liked it so much that I asked my parents if they would send me the next year because I didn't expect the school to pay for it again. So I was like, "This is my birthday present. Could you send me to Learning in the Brain again?" So yeah, it was.
So, what was your big takeaway from that conference? Was there something that really hit you that said, "Wow, I'm going to listen to the rest of this"?
So, well, I'm hoping this doesn't sound too dismissive, but the first time somebody said there's no evidence for learning styles, I wanted to jump up and say hallelujah. Because, we'd all been trained in that. From even when I was in middle school, we'd been taking those. And you can't make 3 lesson plans. Like, and then you feel guilty that you're not making 3 lesson plans. And so they were like, no, what you want to do is like make one really high quality lesson with good visuals paired with, and I was like, oh, I can do that, like I knew I could do. And that didn't require like turning my entire practice upside down because I'd been teaching 17 or 18 years at that point. And so I wasn't like I was going to reinvent everything. And so I was like, oh, these are things I can actually, take from what I'm already doing and modify it. And I'd been doing bell work from my first year because I grew up in the Harry Wong first days of school days. And so I was like, well, if I just make those retrieval practice questions, that, like how can I
Right.
fit into what I'm already doing? So
So you go to the conference and you find out that, praise the Lord, no learning styles. And then you come back. So you have to, well, you probably didn't stop doing that because I'm sure you never were doing 3 lesson plans because
no, nobody is. But then you feel guilty that you're not. So I could stop feeling guilty. And I was like, this is fantastic.
so what else? Okay, so you had your do now retrieval. You started including that. What else did you, and maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be from that conference, but how did you
Right.
make a transition, into science of learning
So I
habits?
think the next step may have been the following summer. I read Powerful Teaching, the Pooja Agarwal and Patrice Bain book. And I was like, okay, I had been doing retrieval, but it was mostly like review at the end of the chapter, right? We're getting ready for a test.
Yeah.
Now let's do that. I didn't know it was called retrieval, and I was like, oh, I need to be sprinkling this throughout everything. And so my biggest change that you would have seen if you come in my classroom afterwards was I put a whiteboard on every desk. And so I was getting an answer from every kid. And we were doing retrieval just whenever I'd be like, oh, their attention's flagging. Take out your markers, like let's do this. And I feel like it made my classroom more interactive because everybody was answering. I wasn't just calling on kids with their hands up. And so, yeah. And then I think I took the pressure off myself to do too much. I mean, I was a science teacher, I had labs and projects, but again, to not feel guilty about the fact that I wasn't trying to shoehorn discovery in every minute of the day.
Okay. But as a science teacher, that's one of the things that you say in your book. It's not, you have to do those things. You know,
Yeah. And it's
it's
important.
yeah.
I do think it's important that they're doing hands-on things. But that's different from discovery. So I would teach it, and then we would go into the lab and be like, now you're going to observe this. But especially with middle schoolers, I had to tell them what to observe. They don't know what it's important to look at. So they're not going to discover it if they don't know what they're supposed to be noticing and what they're supposed to be seeing. And just saying, what did you notice? Well, I had a kid one time tell me like it's smoking. And I'm like, it's not smoking. Those are carbon like those are carbon dioxide bubbles. That's not smoke.
Yeah. So, okay.
But
So you come back and this, what your administrator told you, of course, it's always come back and share,
yeah,
what you learned. You had been teaching for, I think you said 17 years at the
something like
time.
that.
So I'm
Yeah.
guessing you had some status at the school. But that doesn't make any difference when you come back and you're in front of your staff talking about what you learned. Was there any positive or negative reaction? I know this is a long time ago, but
Oh yeah, it was almost entirely positive. So for one thing, I'm in a school where we do have really good relationships with each other, and I had been there a long time. So I was sort of people's go-to with a lot of questions. Anyway, and as a science teacher, that makes a difference too. People asked me if it was going to snow, and I was like, I really don't know. Better than meteorologists, maybe listen to them. But so I had some credibility. But also, I think it confirmed some of what they were thinking as well, because again, you try stuff and you're trying to make things work that aren't working, and you intuitively want to do certain things that PD people are telling you not to. But I sort of became in-house PD there. Like I presented the following year, I did a 6-part series and we were able to get them CEU credit for it because I came back from that conference going, I think I learned enough at this one that we could do like a and that's when I learned I actually really like talking to teachers. I had always said, like, I'm called to teach teenagers. I am not called to talk to adults. And turned out I really enjoyed it once I was talking about something that was worth talking about.
well, it's interesting that you described that about, you went to a couple conferences and I'm sure you had done some reading on your own, but you decided that you were ready to share with folks. That's a question that I think comes up all the time. How much does a teacher need to know about the science of learning, the research behind it? Because, like you said, you came back and said, "Oh, I've been doing this. Now I just tweak this." So, how much do you think a teacher really needs to know before they can start making some meaningful changes in their practice?
It depends on how big a change you want to make, right? Like, I think anybody could come in and say, oh, yeah, I can add retrieval practice throughout my lesson instead of saving it for the end. I think anybody can probably say, oh, yeah, I need to do more formative assessment, like that kind of stuff. If you're wanting to completely, upend how you teach, then you're probably going to need to find a model like the FAST model. That works for you. But yeah, if it is really like just, I think I'm doing okay and I just want to improve, then I think like, yeah, pick a thing to start with and do that. Trying to do everything at once does not work because it's too much of a working memory challenge, right? Like especially if you've been doing it for a while. And so I think just saying like this year, I'm going to try these 2 things, right? Or
Right.
this semester, I'm going to implement this one thing and see if it works and try it with different classes and see how it goes. So,
Well, you have a story about trying retrieval practice in your book. I might have been the first chapter.
yes,
I don't remember. And
it is the first
about
chapter.
Julia, is that
Yeah.
is the name in the book? I was doing scare quotes. We don't know if
Yes.
that's.
I only
Tell
use
us
first
about that.
students.
Okay.
But yes, it is real.
Yeah.
I thought about making one up for her and then it just felt weird. Yeah. So it was important to me to start with that story because when I was sitting down and sort of just laying out the structure of the book, I knew I wanted to start every chapter with a story just because I would enjoy that. So I thought readers might enjoy that too. And it's a little less dry than starting with research. But I was like, the first story is really important because it's going to set the tone for the whole book. And so what I wanted the tone to be is even when we're all doing the very best we can, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to make big mistakes. But what's important is do we fix them and what do we learn from them and how do we do better in the future? And so I wanted that story to be first so that I could set that particular tone, and say, we tell our kids that it's important to learn from their mistakes. It's important for us to learn from ours too. And then also, if any reader happens to also be a parent, holy cow, her mom it was a master class in how to handle a situation
Okay,
graciously.
Beth, you may not want to disclose the entire story, but I'm going to ask you to. I'm not going
Okay.
to ask you to disclose a bunch of them, but like you said, you thought it was an important one.
Yes.
And not only you got kid, you got parents involved, and so you got to
It was.
tell us. You got to share it, Beth.
So yeah, I kind of forgot that you'd read it, and listeners probably wouldn't have yet. So yeah, I was doing, beginning of class retrieval practice. I used the popsicle sticks to help distribute things, right? And my rule was you can't just say I don't know. Because as soon as you do that, everybody says they don't know and nobody's answering questions anymore. And so I asked a girl, and I tried to keep them relatively simple questions. The idea was that it was sort of rapid fire. And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, I'm not going to accept that. Just guess, just tell me something. And she'd stopped for a long time. And she said, I just really don't know. And I can't remember quite how we got out of it, but we did at some point move on. And I got an email from her mom that night that said, she doesn't know I'm writing to you, but that I wanted to explain what happened. And this girl, like English was not her native language, but she spoke very good English. So sometimes I forgot that English was not her native language. And she said, she was trying to translate it in her head. And then she couldn't remember the answer in English. And she said, and then she got to the point where she couldn't remember any words in English other than I don't know. And I just felt terrible because, who wants to embarrass a child like that? But I was so grateful for her mom because one, she spoke to her daughter very kindly about me. She said, I know Miss Hawks was doing what she thought was right for you. She didn't throw me under the bus with her child, but she would have been fully justified in just ripping me a new one. And she didn't. She gave me the opportunity to one, repair things with her daughter, and two, to make sure that didn't happen with other people's daughters and sons in the future.
Yeah.
And it's funny, about 2 weeks later, I was listening to, do you know Craig Barton's podcast
Yes.
on your teachers? So Dylan William was on his podcast and they had a whole conversation about how to not let I don't know be the end of the conversation. And I was like, man, I just heard it like 3 weeks too late.
So, so what did you learn? What did you learn from there?
So,
How did you handle those? Did you handle who you called differently? Did you handle your response differently? How did
so,
you adjust
so
that?
I still kind of did it the same way, but when a student said, I don't know, I might have one time said, come on, give me a guess. But after that, the suggestions he made were really interesting. One was like phone a friend, like ask them if they want to ask somebody else
Yeah.
and say, do you agree with them? Or turn it into a multiple choice question. If I had given her like a couple of answers and said, choose from these, or that kind of thing. And so like just basically lightening up the tension of it. So they
Yeah.
still have to interact with the question, but they're not being forced to produce an answer on their own.
It's funny. One of the things that you mentioned was that if you accept I don't know, then everybody's, I don't know. I was working with a middle school teacher once, and he was having that problem. He was doing his retrieval at the beginning of class, and he'd ask a student a question, say, I don't know. So we talked about that, and I said, well, how about you do this? Yeah, something that I'd seen other teachers do successfully. Say, no problem, I'll get back to you.
Yes, that was another suggestion. Yeah.
And the funny part about that was that the next time I went to observe his class, you could tell he had been doing that because the kids learned how to game that one.
They say come back to
Yeah, yeah. He always went back, but they realized, I don't have to answer the first time. So that, like you say, it's messy. What goes on in classrooms is messy, but there's nothing fatal and nothing final. I mean,
Right.
you can always get to it. And something interesting that you alluded to, if you didn't exactly say this right now, was something that, you talked about learning styles. Another thing that I heard about that same time, which was decades ago, was don't tell a student they're wrong.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
correct them. Oh, that's an interesting answer, but you don't have a problem correcting students.
I don't. I mean, I think a lot of it's in how you approach it. I would either sort of try to make it silly and be like, not quite, thank you for playing. Or I would, sometimes when they're almost right, you can say, like, well, I can see why you would think that, but let me explain why it's something else. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, if we don't correct them, then we're not really teaching them, right? We're just letting them keep their misconceptions. So,
Yeah, and I don't think the kids are as fragile in those situations as folks make them out to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I think part of the culture of school, they realize they're going to get put on the spot, and it's their turn to get put on the spot.
Kids are more comfortable with a lot of things than adults are. I think
Yeah,
like we
yes.
get locked into certain like, oh, well, it must be this way. And I think kids are a lot more open to, especially in middle and high school, they've got six or seven different teachers. So they're used to kind of adapting, I think, to the different ways that we do things.
Absolutely. Now, we didn't talk about this before, but I'm curious about, you mentioned you came back, you tried something, you talked to teachers to get them to try something. Did you ever receive any feedback, or were other teachers, when they tried things, to receive feedback? Because let me tell you, and I'm asking you this really because of a new context, a new thing that you do is that you're a fitness instructor.
Yes.
And one of the things we know about fitness, regardless of what we're doing, is how you do it makes a difference. Form makes a difference. So, and that's part of your job as the instructor, is giving feedback. So when you talk to teachers about what you had learned, were they able to get any feedback about the things that they tried?
So the probably the biggest one, lots of little things, people who had tried stuff and said this worked, but it kind of didn't. Maybe if I tweak it this way, we would talk through some of those ideas. But the one that I found the most fun was the seventh grade English teacher who also had been my student. Thank you. But we were, as in a faculty meeting, and a friend of mine and I had presented, I think we talked about working memory, and we were talking about using whiteboards and retrieval as a way of offloading that too, like, taking a pause in the middle and just doing a little active recovery. And about 3 weeks later, she came in and she said, "Oh my goodness, this is a game changer." And because she taught English, her take on it was a little bit different from mine because I was, reinforcing answers. She was doing more like, what do you think is going to happen next? Or why do you think, this character did this? And
Okay.
she said, I am finally hearing from my introverts, which I thought
Uh,
was such a great take because they didn't mind writing it on the whiteboard and holding it up, but they did not want to talk out loud. And she said they have really insightful things to say that I haven't been getting until now. So I thought that was a great piece of feedback from her.
oh, you know what? That is one of the books that really changed the way that I looked at the interactions of students, and what we asked students to do was Susan Cain's book, Quiet.
Quiet.
You
That's
know, oh, and if teachers, if you haven't read it, I think it's so important, especially if you're a teacher who puts kids in groups every day.
Mhm.
It is so tough. It is so tough on some kids. And so it's so easy to misattribute silence to
And
resistance to all sorts of things.
I think we've been treating them like they're wrong. Like that's a problem to be fixed. We need to turn them into extroverts.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong. They're just different. Like they're just expressing their thoughts differently. So yeah, finding a way that they could contribute and still be comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you started out, I'm going to go back to 17 years ago. You went to conferences, you came back and you shared with folks and wanted to get them to try one or two things. But in your book, you've got 10 chapters, and each of those chapters is a topic in the science of learning.
Yes.
Is that something that before you left the classroom after your experience, learning all this, that you were able to do all the time consistently?
Consistently, no. But those were the 10 topics that I felt like had made the biggest impact in my classroom. And of course, some of them are related to each other, right? Like formative assessment usually is also retrieval practice.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of overlap to them as well.
I'm sorry, Beth, before we continue, do you happen to have those in front of you that you could read them? Because I do. I could read them so we could list all of them. You want me to
Oh,
do that?
I don't have them in front of me, but you
Okay,
want to?
I do. I do. So let's I'm going to read the 10, and these are
Okay.
your chapters.
Yeah.
These are your chapters. 1, working memory.
Yeah.
2, clarity for learning. 3, prior knowledge and schema. 4, focus and diffuse models. 5, rich encoding. 6, the dangers of discovery learning, which we're going to talk about in a second. The dangers of discovery learning. Engagement is a means, not an end. Chapter 7, modeling and scaffolding. Chapter 8, when to memorize, Chapter 9, retrieval, and 10, formative assessment.
Yes.
So as you think about those, as you just, before I rudely interrupted you,
That's
so
okay.
you talked about how they're not completely disparate.
Right. So because what you're doing retrieval on are the things you're memorizing. A lot of that is formative assessment, and some of it is to reduce the working memory load challenge. So I feel like there's a ton of overlap between all of them. And I think learning about working memory was probably one of my bigger aha moments, like, oh, in the trying to cover everything and fit things in, right? Like the pressure of curriculum.
Yeah.
I'm making sure they learn nothing, right? Like, because I'm overloading it in thinking that I'm just like covering more and actually trying to back up a little bit, notice those times when they're flipping without any evident direction through their notebook and, staring into the middle distance, just going, oh, this might be a time when we need to pause and offload for a minute. And it's not going to eat up that much class time, you know.
Well,
I
no.
say stand up, look down, look left, look right, sit back down. It doesn't have to take that much time.
It's funny that you mentioned cognitive load because I found in the 20 plus years that I've been, talking to teachers about explicit instruction and coaching, that's one of the first things. That's one of the first pushbacks. We have so much to cover.
Mhm.
It's legitimate. On the
Yeah,
other hand, what you just said, it's one of those things that it is an aha moment. It's like, yeah, it's the old joke. I taught it, but nobody learned
I
it.
learned it. Yeah.
So was that a big moment for you and for other teachers as you talk to them? And the presentations that you do, is that one of the emphasis that you have?
Yeah, I do think that it's brought up a lot. Like, well, then how do we cover everything? And I'm like, well, you probably can't. So, like, I had it down pretty well in physical science and physics. In chemistry, I had to make this decision every year. We're not going to cover everything. What chapter do I leave out? Or, like, how do we get what's less essential than others, right? Because there are some things they've got to learn about my curriculum, and then there are some things we could let go. And I also think, too, sometimes explicit teaching is the most efficient. So you might actually save some time if you're not trying to have them figure things out on their own for every lesson that you're doing things with. And yeah, like just trying to figure out where you can work that in while also pausing now and then for working
Well,
memory load.
and I think thank you for mentioning Teach Fast earlier, and we're going to bring it up again because one of the things that you just mentioned is one of the things that the teachers realize is that there is a lot of slack in their lessons that they don't know about.
Mhm.
And once like, they'll say, look at our pacing guide, we can't cover it. And I'm saying right now, it's just a theoretical document, but I think you're going to find that you're going to be getting through more content if we take a look at these things from the science of learning, and they're going to remember more. You're going to be able to move on. You're going to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like you say, all of these things are related. None of them are disparate. So when you do your presentations, you're talking at Research Ed throughout the country. What's your favorite topic to talk about with teachers?
In the last 2 years, I've done basically two topics. In the next 3 months, I'm going to be doing four. So I don't know if I have an answer to that yet. So far, I've mostly done formative assessment because when I was trying to come up with something that I could present at conferences, I was like, what's not out there, right? I wasn't going to go to a conference with Andrew Watson and talk about working memory. He's already got that covered. And so I felt like formative assessment was one I hadn't seen a ton. And then last year, I added to it helping students study because that became, after I found cognitive science, that became my favorite thing to do was to talk to students about what they were doing. Like, so if a student like failed a test or didn't do as well as they would have liked, I'd be like, come on in, let's talk.
Yeah.
And they would tell me what they were doing. And I would be like, okay, here's why that's not working. Now let's talk about how you can tweak it. And, okay, you make flashcards. That's awesome. Now, how are you using them? And so I developed a talk on that last year, and I really enjoyed presenting on because that's one where I think you can have a big impact too, because that's not just going to help them in your class. That's going to help them
Right.
in all classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to kind of piggyback on that, did you teach your students about science of learning?
I did. Now, not as much as as I was learning. I had to hold myself back from telling them everything. But I actually found it helped with their motivation. Like if they understood how their brain worked. I think it was the goal with learning styles, right? Like even though they were wrong, I think it was well intended that they thought,
Yeah.
well, you know how your brain works, it'll make you more motivated. And actually knowing it and saying, okay, now here might be what will help because it works with your brain instead of against it. They would have fun with it. They'd come in and be like, let me show you my flashcards. Let me show you what I did. So yeah, we did. We talked a lot about it. I would do like about a week before our first test, I would do a lesson on studying with them, like a full class lesson. But it was really the individual conversations that had the impact because then they were coming in because they knew they needed it, you know.
Yeah. Well, I really think that teachers are going to get a lot out of this, and you've presented it in a way that they're going to be able to talk about it in the staff room, is what you know, the things that you talked about, because they can talk about what they do. Now in your final chapter, you included something that I hear and I don't understand when I hear it.
Okay.
And that is, so there's this evidence about how we learn, but nobody can tell you how to teach. And
I said
you
it.
didn't say it, but I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think you quoted Tom Sherrington. You,
Okay.
you quoted Tom Sherrington. I've heard other people say it. I heard George, what's the fella? Horvath. What's the guy who just wrote the Digital Delusions book? Jared Horvath says, he says, I always tell teachers, nobody can tell you how to teach. And I'm thinking, I just got a lot of good advice from Beth here.
I think maybe where I would be going with that is I don't want to tell you exactly what to do
Okay.
because like good advice is one thing, but you have to figure out how to make that work for you and your students and your content. So that might be a better way to put it is that I want to give you more way to think about it, to build your own professional judgment so that when you're making decisions, teachers make thousands of decisions a day on the
Yeah.
fly. Like what are some concepts you should have in your head that you're basing those decisions on?
Well, I think if we have a science of learning that doesn't give us some direction about how to teach, it's not worth
Right,
anything.
right, right.
It's just
Yeah.
nice we can walk around and, at a party and have a drink in our hand.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, Beth, it has been wonderful, and I hope people will buy your book. When's it going to be available?
It comes out August 6th. You can pre-order it now. It's on the
Okay,
Bloomsbury website and on Amazon.
awesome.
Uh,
Okay,
so yeah, but 2 weeks from today, well, it'll be a week once this airs.
well, but it's available now. So, okay,
Yeah.
Beth, do you have any questions for me?
So I am interested in your journey here too. Like, when did you discover the science of learning and how did that change your practice?
Well, as I told you before we started, I had a couple experiences with football coaches who were just outstanding teachers. They would break things down, what folks would say in science of atomization, but I would just say it was step by step. And I thought, man, I could teach anybody anything if I knew how to do it.
Yeah.
If I know how to do it, now I could teach them. But I didn't know how to translate that into, like, I was typical social studies coach, right? So I had no idea. I was a good teacher as a coach. That was my strength. But classroom, I had no idea how to do that. And so when I went to work as a consultant and I had a chance to see teacher after teacher, we would train in explicit instruction and then coach, it all came together for me. And then when I saw something work, that there's got to be an explanation for this. There's got to be an explanation for this. And so the actual science of learning, I would say I did more like 18 or 19 years just studying teachers and classroom instruction and getting good teachers to tweak and to do this. And then what I learned when I got into the science of learning cult, everything was explained. everything was explained. Oh, this is why this works. This is why this works. This is why this works. And if something doesn't work, I can also realize that this is why it doesn't work. And so that my journey was kind of backdoor. And yeah, and that's where, and like Teach Fast. So I would say Teach Fast is not a, which is being reissued and should be out, should be available in the next week or so. But that's what it is. It's almost like an ethnography. It's like I've just been observed. Let's
Mhm.
try this. And that's how I came to it.
That is one of the things I found was like a lot of stuff we either did intuitively or did found worked by trial and error. When I learned about the science of learning, I was like, oh, that's backing up the trial and error. Like
Yeah.
it
Yes.
enabled me to do it more intentionally,
Yes.
plan it
Yes.
instead of
Yes.
wandering my way into it.
Yes.
Um,
Well, and was also, I would have loved to have a chance to work with you because the most exciting times when I was coaching was with teachers who really had it. They were expert when I walked in. And so I got to see what they were doing and to have conversations with them. And when they tried something, it wasn't, like I went to a conference and I have no idea. I'm going to try it cold. They realized, no, I just need to tweak this just a
right,
touch and to see how much it happened. I'll never forget is working with high school coaches, and the coaches were all department chairs in the school. And so they were adding on a coaching element to them. And I'll never forget working with the science teacher. We were going through coaching cycles. It was a physics teacher. So I was going to observe the AP physics class, which I ditched all the science once I realized I wanted to be a coach. Like I don't need it. Anyway, so asked her what she was teaching, and I don't remember. There were two. She goes, I'm going to teach. I got two things I want to teach tomorrow. One of them is the subject that Einstein got his Nobel Prize on. And the other one is, and she told me something else. And I thought, wait a second, that seems like a lot. you know? So anyway, she agreed to, okay, she was just going to teach this one thing. And we went through the, planning a lesson together using explicit instruction framework. She went in and she said, I'm going to tell you though, I'm going to tell you right now, my kids aren't used to this. They're not going to like it. Because what I normally do, I go in, talk for a couple minutes, give them something to work on, and they're working with their partners. They're not going to like this, and I'm going to ask them after. So I go in and I watch this lesson, and I mean, God, I wish I had a video. To this day, it's one of the best lessons that I've ever seen. I mean, just in every place where we talked about, well, after this, maybe we should check for understanding. You want to go, you don't want to go too far before you have to. I mean, she was just awesome. And the next day, we go in to do the debrief. And I said, what'd your kids think? And she said, oh, they liked the lesson. They said, I didn't need to give them two examples. The first one was a good example. I didn't need to give them two. So they didn't even notice. And I guess that's the point is that, like you said, we expect the kids to be these fragile. No, they understand when something good is happening too. I mean, they were good with it. So anyway, I don't know how I got there, but anything else we should be talking about, Beth?
I think we're good. I think we've
Uh,
covered it
all
all.
right. Well, it was great. It's a little bit of work getting together here today, but I appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to talk to you about your new book, and the title is
Show your work, teaching smarter with the science of learning.
Awesome, Beth. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X, at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused Adaptable Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles.